If you're watching this, you might be a high school senior and you're probably deciding where you're going to go for your next 4 years for college. And it's a very big decision. SRIs might be coming up, and that's probably how you stumbled across this video today. Or you may be a transfer student looking to transfer into UCSB. Whatever your situation is, in this video, I'm going to cover the pros and cons of attending UCSB. Quick disclaimer though, these are all my opinions, and what's a pro for me might be a con for you or someone else. So, quick introduction before we hop into the video. My name's Andrew, and I'm an economics major and history minor. I completed all my pre-major courses for econ, so be sure to check out my video on that. And I've also finished my second year at UCSB, and I'm going to be going into my third in the fall. So I've been able to experience a lot about UCSB, and I want to share that with you today. So let's get started with the pros. First pro on the list is the location. One of the first things that people bring up when talking about UCSB is definitely the location, and I can definitely confirm that the campus is absolutely beautiful. UCSB is located right next to the beach, and it has multiple pathways where you can take a relaxing walk while looking at the ocean. One of my favorite things to do was to stand at Campus Point, which is where I took this video, and look at the waves crashing against the rocks. Pro number 2 is the weather. So a common saying around UCSB is that it's always sunny in Santa Barbara, which is very true. Outside of this year's storms, UCSB has consistently sunny weather. One thing I will say though is that it's also very double-sided, meaning that it'll be warm and sunny during the day, but at night it's super cold. And so I often say that being at SB, you need 2 outfits per day. The next pro is education. And while it's definitely somewhat subjective, I really feel like I'm being taught by experts in their fields, and I make sure to go on Rate My Professor and find good classes with good professors. And so far, I feel like the professors that I've had are really professional, and they actually do their best to teach and make sure their students are learning. Outside of just my opinion, I saw that US News ranks it number 32 in national universities and 7 for public schools, and Forbes has it for 39 for all universities and 13 in public schools. But of course, that's when I checked these, and that was a little bit ago, so it might have changed by now. But I would definitely say that UCSB is a pretty good university for education. Another pro is the community. In my 2 years here at UCSB, I've met many friends and also neighbors that were really cool people. Overall, many people here are extremely friendly, and it's really easy to meet people that share the same interests as you, whether that be in your classes, your dorm neighbors, people in clubs and organizations, or just random people you meet walking to class or in the gym, or wherever else you get to meet people. The community here is really inviting and friendly. Next up, we have partying. So it's not a secret that UCSB is known for its party culture, and it definitely lives up to the hype. There's always someone throwing some party every weekend, and they're usually pretty fun. UCSB also has Deltopia on the first weekend of spring quarter, which is basically the biggest party of the year, and it's big enough that it gets into the news every year. I will say some of these parties do get a little rowdy, and there's actually been some pretty major accidents related to partying, so make sure you're staying safe. Next thing I want to talk about is the food. So this might be an area of contention, but in my opinion, the food at UCSB is pretty decent. It is pretty hit or miss though, I will say. They have some great dishes, such as the chicken arrabbiata and garlic bread at Carrillo, but they'll also have some not so great dishes. So UCSB has 4 dining halls: DLG, Carrillo, Portola, and Ortega. Ortega is the most interesting of them all, so it's a takeout dining hall where you order food ahead of time on an app, and then you scan a code and pick it up in a locker. In my overall rankings, I would go Carrillo is the best, followed by Portola, Ortega, and DOG is definitely last for me, and it's probably last for a lot of people. Another big pro is the rec center. So UCSB has a large gym known as the Recreation Center, or just Rec Center for short, and it's very spacious and it has lots of different equipment for you to use to work out. They also have 2 basketball courts, and they're always pretty full, and there's always a pickup game being played. They also have a rock climbing area, and there's also sometimes fitness classes going on. There's also a big pool area with a hot tub on the side as well. And this year they just opened 6 new squat racks, so there's more equipment to go around. It is pretty busy at pretty much every hour, but they have everything that you can dream for at a gym. The last pro is events, so there's always something going on in UCSB. One of my personal favorites is the basketball games, and the men's team this year made the March Madness tournament for the second time in the last 3 years. And we also have a rivalry with Cal Poly, so our rivalry soccer game with Cal Poly is pretty big as well. Arts and Lectures also hosts performances and speaker talks. The AS program board hosts fun events all year long, such as concerts, and they're pretty good prices. So for example, this fall we had Isaiah Rashad perform and tickets were only like $5 to $10. They also have extravaganza in the spring where they bring out usually 3 to 4 artists, and you can see the lineups in previous years at AS program board on Instagram. There's also lots of events going on at the dorms, so RAs hold events for their residents and they often have food, drinks, some games, maybe a movie going on. And even if you don't live on that floor, you can still attend. Also, the Rec Cen, which I mentioned before, also holds discounted rates for students for their classes or trips that they have on their website, so you can check those out. Alright, so now that I talked about the pros, I want to get into sort of a gray area. So these are parts where I don't want to put it as a pro or as a con because I feel like these are very subjective areas. And so the first thing I want to put in here are the dorms. So I lived on the first floor of San Nicolas my first year, and overall it was pretty decent. The soundproofing on the walls is not very great, and every time someone came in or out of the building, I heard it from my room, and I'm not even close to the door. I'm about halfway through the hallway. San Nic also has communal bathrooms, and this is probably the part that's the most polarizing in my opinion, at least. So for me, I honestly didn't mind it too much. On my floor, we only had 3 stalls, so it is a little annoying when it's completely filled and you have to go somewhere else to use the bathroom, but usually I didn't really need to wait. There were also 4 to 5 shower stalls, and usually there wasn't really a wait for those either. I only had to wait probably like 2 or 3 times throughout the year to shower, so I don't think it was that bad. It is a little interesting to see how other people act in the bathrooms, because I've definitely seen some very interesting and slightly disgusting behavior, but I'm not going to talk about that because that's a case-to-case basis. Overall, I didn't mind it too much, but it's definitely not the first on my list. So for my second year, I lived in San Rafael, and it's definitely a big upgrade. So this time I lived on the 6th floor, and I have a wonderful view of the campus. And San Raf has suite style rooms, so we have our own bathroom. I did share it with 2 other housemates, but it's definitely much better than the communal bathrooms. In my opinion, if you're first year and you don't really want that dorm experience, I would say get a group of friends and apply to live in San Raf together. Next thing I want to talk about is the quarter system. So you either hate it or you love it. Quarter systems really are pretty fast paced. So a quarter at UCSB is 10 weeks long, and you have another week for finals. So that means within 3 to 4 weeks you're going to have a midterm, and some classes have multiple. I also have a friend in engineering, and he has a midterm pretty much every single week. So that means for multiple consecutive weeks, you're going to be studying and taking midterms on things you learned probably just a few days ago. So if you're not used to this speed, you're really going to have to dial in and study hard. But on the other hand, you might like how fast paced it is because it's not so much of a drag and you get to take different and new classes every 10 weeks. And that's definitely how I feel. Personally, my high school used semesters, and when I came here, I found the pace to not be that hard to adjust to. And I really like having new classes quickly, because if I had to sit through a whole semester of macroeconomics again, I definitely would not have enjoyed that. So now we're getting into the cons. First up on the list is the location. So I know I said in the pros that location was a good thing, but I want to talk about the bad side of the location now. So despite being called UC Santa Barbara, it's not actually located in the city of Santa Barbara. It's located in Goleta, and the small college community that lives off campus is Isla Vista. And so because of this, UCSB isn't near downtown, and it actually takes about 20 minutes driving and 30 minutes to about an hour on the bus, depending on which one you take. Just a quick tip here, if you want to get to downtown fast, take the 24X, because it has less stops than the 11. There's also not too many shops directly next to UCSB. There is a plaza located about 10 to 15 minutes away if you ride the bus. So honestly, it's not that big of a deal, especially if you have your car, because you can just drive there in about 5-ish minutes. But if you like the feel of a big city, you're not really going to get it from UCSB. The next con is the cost. While everyone's talking about in-state versus out-of-state tuition, another important factor I find is the local economy and cost of living around the college. So like I just mentioned, we're in Goleta and Isla Vista. UCSB is not incredibly close to that many big stores or restaurants. There are a lot of food locations in Ivy, don't get me wrong, and small markets, but knowing that they're the only easily accessible locations for students to buy food or other things, they're pretty overpriced. So if you're going out for food in Ivy, you're definitely looking at probably around $15, $17 for a meal, which in my opinion is pretty pricey, especially when some of the food is simply just not that good. Another big thing in college in general is textbooks, and you're probably going to have to buy textbooks at some point, and they're definitely not cheap. Also, speaking from experience as an econ major, sometimes your homework is linked to online websites, which is then linked into your gradebook, and they make you pay for these, and you cannot get out of it because your grade relies on this. Out of all the cons with UCSB, this one definitely deserves to be first on the list. I don't know why I didn't put it first on the list, but if I'm ranking the cons, this is definitely the worst one. Housing. UCSB has a housing crisis. There's simply not enough housing to go around for everyone, and this often means that people who want to have a housing contract with UCSB might find themselves without a place to live. And if you don't want to live at a UCSB facility or you can't get a contract, living in Ivy is incredibly expensive in my opinion. Rent on the cheap side is probably at least $1,000 a month, and that's if you're lucky. I've seen prices for what's the equivalent of a triple to be at least $1,300 per month per person. I'm fortunate enough to get a housing contract for the UCSB apartments, and it's definitely a lot cheaper. It's around $700 to $800 a month, but there's definitely a lot of other people who aren't so lucky. Also, the apartments in Ivy aren't exactly incredible either. I don't know why, but for some reason, a lot of the places in Ivy don't come with lights, so you have to bring your own lamp just for lighting. And I've also heard stories of landlords who don't really care about their tenants and the conditions of the apartments and their overall living experience. They're pretty much there just to collect a check. So overall, housing, pretty big issue at UCSB. I would say go with one of the UCSB apartments, but if you can't get a contract with UCSB, you're going to have to live in Ivy, which honestly isn't terrible, I will say. It's not that bad, but it's definitely not something that I would be extremely looking forward to. Next con I want to talk about is Isla Vista being anti-car. So Ivy is known to be pretty difficult to find parking, and there's all sorts of traffic. There's cars, there's bikes, pedestrians, and it's pretty frustrating to navigate. And a lot of the people driving, as well as the people biking, often have no regard for anyone else and just do whatever they want. So you have to be very careful when going around. Also, if you want to park at UCSB, you need a parking permit, and I don't know the exact price, but it's definitely not cheap. So you're going to have to shell out some extra money for that as well. Coming to my last con, this is definitely in the top 3 worst things at UCSB. So UCSB is a public university. One of the biggest problems at UCSB is having to select your courses. So this is how it works. You get a pass time, which is basically a time frame that you're allowed to add or drop classes from your schedule, or what you're very likely going to have to do, waitlist a class. And the thing is, your pass time is based on how many units you complete. So as you can probably guess, people who have more units, who are usually people who have been at UCSB longer, will get better priority when it comes to choosing classes. Also, you can only sign up for a certain amount of units in every pastime, so that means you really have to pick your top 2 classes and hope that your next favorite class does not get filled up until your next pastime. And so this leaves a lot of people with classes that they don't really need or want, but they just have to take because they need 12 units to be considered a full-time student, and if you don't have 12 units, that's going to affect your financial aid. So to combat that, UCSB's counselors and many students, including me, advise that you choose many different classes, often in the double-digit numbers, that you're willing to take in order that you have backup plans to your backup plans to your other backup plans for classes. With all that being said, you'll probably have to take classes that weren't your first, second, or even third choice, depending on how popular the class you want is. While we're on the topic of classes, like I said, UCSB is a public university, and an econ major is one of the most popular majors to be. So I've definitely been in classes where the amount of students is probably 500 to 700 people. So if you're not really into that, then that's probably going to be a con for you. However, UCSB does have smaller classes called section, which is basically classes with your TA, and they're probably about 30 people. And this is really the time to ask questions to your TA about anything that you didn't get during lecture. But of course, you can always go to office hours to your professor or your TA to ask questions as well. So to conclude, honestly, UCSB wasn't my first choice of where I wanted to go to college. But once I got here, I found that I really enjoyed it, and I don't regret my decision to stay at all. I've met good friends here that I'm sure I'll still talk to when college is over. Classes are going well for me, and I met my wonderful girlfriend here as well. Now, everyone's experience is going to be different, but I would definitely recommend that you come to UCSB, and I think that you're going to love it here. So that's it for this video. Leave it a like, share with someone else who might also be thinking about going to UCSB. And if you are currently at UCSB, comment down any pros and cons that you have. And if anyone has any questions, be sure to comment that and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you all for watching.